Woohoo! Hey, good morning. You're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal, 6:05 a.m. Man, it's so nice that the weather has just warmed up. I mean, yesterday it didn't even feel like January. If it gets up to 60 in January, that is a blessing because, man, it's been cold these last couple of weeks, and I'm just glad to see the sun. Today, the high is going to be 49. So we're getting up to the 50s. And then I think by the weekend, we're going to see like approaching 60 on Sunday, which is so exciting. I've got so much to get to. Now, the left, they've got this whole, federal funding freeze, and they're going to try to lie to you about this. Much like the school raids, okay? They're going to say that, Medicaid, people aren't going to get their Medicare. People aren't going to get their Social Security or their SNAP benefits. That's not happening, much like school raids weren't happening, okay? We have an obligation as a news outlet to provide you accurate information. That is not happening. Nobody is going to be losing their SNAP benefits. Nobody is going to be losing their Medicaid or their Social Security benefits, okay? This is not a freeze on individual funding. If you are receiving individual funds from the government, this is not that, okay? This is arguably the best thing that Trump has ever done. Okay. The single most important thing that Trump has ever done is this funding freeze. Now, it's not a blanket funding freeze, okay, because you're still going to get your SNAP benefits. If you're on SNAP benefits, you're also going to still get your Social Security benefits if you have Social Security and if you collect Social Security. It's not a funding freeze. I can't express that enough, okay? Much like the ICE agents, ICE baby, they're not going into the schools via the ceiling and dropping in like ninjas and snapping up children. Okay, that's not happening at all. They're not doing school raids. They are could be possibly. Much like the sheriff said, it could happen. He seriously doubts it, especially here in McLean County, maybe more so in Chicago, where you have ages 14 to 17, those Venezuelan migrants who also happen to be going to school. They're going to target those individuals because they're public safety threats and a risk to national security. So Tom Homan is going to target those individuals, go into the school, not in a raid style fashion. Okay, they're not doing sweeps. They're not doing raids where they're rounding up people, looking at their skin tone, and then deporting them. That's not what's going on. These are people with prior convictions and people who are deemed public safety threats. Okay, so I want to get to this. This is a really important thing that Trump has done because the immigration crisis is no accident. Okay, this is a well-oiled state sanctioned system facilitated by powerful non-government organizations, and they are funded by your tax dollars. By defunding these NGOs, that is Trump's goal with this federal freeze. Okay, make no mistake, this federal funding freeze, like I said, it doesn't affect your Social Security, SNAP, nothing like that. He's crippling the entire system. He's crippling these NGOs, and it's long, long overdue. Take a listen to this reporter. The only people who are confused by this are mainstream media, your publicly funded radio, and these hacks that call themselves journalists. They're journalismers. I'm not going to give them the respect of the title journalist. Take a listen. They seem to be the only ones confused about what the federal funding act or federal funding freeze actually applies to, and the press secretary actually clears it up. So take a listen.
So the question yesterday, the White House Office of Management and Budget directed across the board freeze, with some exceptions for individual assistance, we understand, to federal grants. It's caused a lot of confusion around the country among Head Start providers, among providers services to homeless veterans, Medicaid providers, states saying they're having trouble accessing the portal. Could you help us clear up some of the confusion,
Yes.
give some certainty to folks? And also, is that uncertainty, how does that uncertainty service the president's voters?
Well, I think there's only uncertainty in this room amongst the media. There's no uncertainty in this building. So let me provide the certainty and the clarity that all of you need. This is not a blanket pause on federal assistance and grant programs from the Trump administration. Individual assistance, that includes, I'm not naming everything that's included, but just to give you a few examples, Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits, food stamps, welfare benefits, assistance that is going directly to individuals will not be impacted by this pause. And I want to make that very clear to any Americans who are watching at home who may be a little bit confused about some of the media reporting. This administration, if you are receiving individual assistance from the federal government, you will still continue to receive that. However, it is the responsibility of this president and this administration to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. That is something that President Trump campaigned on. That's why he has launched DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, who is working alongside OMB. And that's why OMB sent out this memo last night, because the president signed an executive order directing OMB to do just this. And the reason for this is to ensure that every penny that is going out the door is not conflicting with the executive orders and actions that this president has taken. So what does this pause mean? It means no more funding for illegal DEI programs. It means no more funding for the Green New scam that has cost American taxpayers tens of billions of dollars. It means no more funding for transgenderism and wokeness across our federal bureaucracy and agencies. No more funding for Green New Deal social engineering policies. Again, people who are receiving individual assistance, you will continue to receive that. And President Trump is looking out for you by issuing this pause because he is being good steward of your taxpayer dollars.
Thanks, Karoline.
Sure.
Okay. She goes on and she talks about how there were $50 million of your dollars, federal taxpayer dollars, okay? They were allocated $50 million for condoms in Gaza, okay? And birth control for other countries. I mean, we were purchasing birth control for individuals. I mean, this is not any kind of like war assistance, okay, or humanitarian aid, okay? That's not humanitarian aid, providing birth control and condoms to people in Gaza. Like, give me a break, okay? That's not humanitarian aid. Now, let me talk about what this actually is and why President Donald Trump is doing this. I think that this is probably the single most important thing that Trump has done so far in his presidency. Last week, what Trump did, he signed an executive order suspending refugee admissions into the United States because it's just such a mess right now. And he said, you know what, I'm suspending it for right now. No more asylum claims. We have so many that we have to process right now. We're not allowing refugee admissions into the United States right now. We have to get through these asylum claims that we already have. Then he took it a step further, which is really exciting. The State Department, they issued a stop work order to their non-government organization partners, okay? And they suspended all funding for refugee resettlement. Okay, so here's what's going on. This immigration crisis, the border crisis, is not by accident. This is all a well-oiled system facilitated by these non-government organizations. And the immigrant crisis, or the immigration crisis, the illegal immigration crisis, I should say, because these aren't actual refugees. They're not fleeing from war-torn countries or political prosecution or religious persecution, or political persecution or religious persecution. They are people who these NGOs funnel into the country, and then they wind up putting them in places like HelloFresh. Okay, I brought you this story a while ago. It's one of the largest meal kit providers in the United States, HelloFresh. And it turns out there was a factory in Aurora, Illinois. I've told you this story, where 6 teenagers from Guatemala were found working the night shift at this factory, and they were, I mean, this is child labor. Okay, so HelloFresh, they claimed that it was the staffing agency, and they were to blame because they hire migrants, and they didn't do their due diligence to figure out if they were kids or not. But get this, folks, what's really troubling here is HelloFresh, they're partnered with, okay, Tent Partnership for Refugees. Okay, HelloFresh is, and that whole facilitation of their partnership was done by the government in December of 2022. The U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, he signed a memorandum of understanding, so an official agreement with the Tent Partnership, with multiple other NGOs like Tent Partnership, to expand, quote, economic opportunity for refugees in the private sector. So, I mean, the child labor, the exploitation of these immigrants, this is all done with your money, and it's financed by our government. So to be clear, these NGOs exist to subvert the U.S. immigration law at every step of the process. Okay, this isn't actually about finding refugees a place to live and getting them away from their religious persecution and their political persecution. No, 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 no. This is about getting them into places, children, human trafficking, state-sanctioned human trafficking. That's really what this is. They're getting children to go work in these factories late at night, and they're minors. Okay, these were Guatemalan illegal minors. Okay, and they're subverting our immigration law. These NGOs with our money, right? They're getting paid with our money. And they subvert our law at every step of the process, actively transporting illegals into this country, fighting enforcement efforts at the border, resettling migrants into American town cities, factories. They're resettling these illegal immigrants into these town cities, and they're lobbying for open border policies at the same time in Washington, D.C. These NGOs need to be defanged. Okay, they need to be declawed because you pay your taxes, your government, what they were doing under the Biden administration and what Donald Trump is freezing, your government was sending that money to NGOs. The NGOs hand it to the immigrants, and in most cases hand a little bit to the immigrants and keep most of it to themselves. And you work, you pay the taxes, but guess who benefits? It's not even the immigrants whom the NGOs claim to be helping. Okay, the Immigration Project here in Normal, they claim to be helping these people, but actually they're funneling money into their own pockets, and then they wind up placing immigrant children in places like HelloFresh and have them work as children and violate our child labor laws. Okay, that's what's going on in these NGOs. The immigrants aren't benefiting. The only people benefiting are the people with these cushy jobs in these non-government organizations. And Donald Trump, with this funding freeze, that's what he's addressing. Okay, there's been too much money going to these NGOs like Tent Partnership. Like I said, the Secretary of State in 2022, he signed an agreement and said that we're going to be partnering with Tent Partnership for refugees to expand, quote, economic opportunity for refugees in the private sector. So we're funneling these immigrants into these places. And in some cases, you wind up with human trafficking, child labor rings. This is inhumane. It's immoral. And it's all because of the open border policies in the cities adopting and the states adopting sanctuary status, okay, which makes this so much easier for the NGOs to place them in places like Illinois, Aurora, Illinois. This is not an oops. This is all on purpose. It's a multinational human trafficking child labor ring. That's what this is. And Donald Trump is putting a stop to it by saying, no, we're not going to be funding the people who are facilitating that kind of immoral behavior. So your SNAP benefits, they're safe. Your Medicaid, it's safe. Your Social Security benefits, all safe. That's not what he's going after. He's specifically going after sending $50 million worth of condoms over to Gaza under the guise of humanitarian aid. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. All right. What are we going to be talking about this morning? I want to talk about an Illinois lawmaker. He is accusing U.S. senators and the governor of taking credit for the Stellantis jobs. I'm sure you've heard that news. It's like 1,500 jobs are coming to the Belvidere plant. Well, that was quick. Who told you? You know, we're so, I hate to say it, but you are so much more equipped with knowledge than any other audience because you listen to this show. Because you listen to this show, you know what's going to happen before it even happens. The Illinois lawmaker, Adam Niebuhr, he's accusing U.S. Senators Tammy Duckworth and Dick Durbin and Governor J.B. Pritzker of taking credit for the Stellantis jobs. That's not what happened here. What happened here was that the Trump administration and Donald Trump met with stakeholders at Stellantis. Stellantis is this auto manufacturer. And I think it's Dodge, Chrysler, maybe another one or so, but I told you that the jobs were going to come back to Belvidere the moment Trump took office. And really what I think it is, it's the tariffs that probably freaked out Stellantis. They're actually currently, and I don't know if they plan to continue to do this, probably not, but they've invested a whole lot of money into expanding their Brazilian plant, and they've kept this Belvidere plant closed. Why? It's cheaper to do it in Brazil. But guess what? Donald Trump said, you know what? We're going to tariff the hell out of you, and you're going to have to come back to the United States and bring jobs to the United States. And guess what happened? That's exactly what happened. Now we're seeing the jobs come back to Illinois. This is huge. But of course, you're going to have Dick Durbin, Tammy Duckworth, Governor J.B. Pritzker say, oh, it's actually the UAW who did all of this. It's actually the labor unions who did this. No, it's because the Stellantis chairman met with Donald Trump for a couple of days, and then they came to an agreement. And he said that he'd bring back the American jobs here in the country. Okay, bring back the American jobs. I got to take a quick break, but we're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Then I do also want to get to Illinois Policy Institute. They're urging reforms, reform for Illinois. They're actually also urging for reforms amidst the Madigan legal team wrapping up their defense against these federal corruption charges, which include bribery. We know Michael Madigan. You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back kind of thing. That's what he's being charged for, and he could possibly be convicted. But despite the verdict, I think everybody can agree that we need to fix Illinois and reform the broken system. And I'm going to get to that here in just a little bit. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Hey, good morning. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends. Am I serious? Yes, I am serious. I think you're talking about the HelloFresh story that actually happened. You had child immigrants forced to work. This is child labor. Okay, they were minors, 6 Guatemalan kids who were forced to work at this food process. It's like a meal kit provider. So it's like they make these little meal kits and they send them to your door. So yeah, the HelloFresh, they were caught doing this, but it's really not HelloFresh. So HelloFresh actually partnered with and they cut ties with Midway Staffing, which is the agency that ultimately hired the migrants. But guess who was working with that agency? It was the tent partnership. Okay, so HelloFresh told ABC they were troubled by the staffing agency who facilitated the hiring of migrant children, but they are partners with Tent Partnership for Refugees. Now, if you go look up Tent Partnership for Refugees, there's like thousands upon thousands of companies that have partnered with this non-government organization. Now, Antony Blinken, they signed an agreement, aka we're going to send taxpayer dollars to you, Tent Partnership for Refugees, and we're going to work with you to expand economic opportunity for refugees in the private sector. So really what that is, it's we're going to send you taxpayer dollars, and in turn, you're going to send children, into factories for them to work and violate all of our child labor laws, and you're going to do that on taxpayer dime. That's quite, I mean, this is inhumane. According to Reform for Illinois Campaign Finance Database, Midway Staffing, which is a temp agency that also facilitated this, like so many people, HelloFresh, Midway Staffing, this whole story, what should have happened was somebody should have spoke up and said, no, this is wrong. We shouldn't be partnering with these non-government organizations who are seeking taxpayer or have gotten taxpayer dollars. We're in the private sector. Let's not partner with these non-government organizations. They can be very, very dangerous. Not all, but most, I would say, non-government organizations are just a complete scam, and then they get taxpayer monies, and then they wind up doing nefarious things, and that is what Donald Trump is doing with this federal funding freeze. So in the beginning of this week, the left and the media, but I repeat myself, lied to you about the school raids. They said that school raids were happening. They said that ICE agents had entered public school. They were Secret Service agents that were investigating assassination threats made against the President of the United States. The student had made those threats. So they were investigating that. But they made that lie up. They have completely made this up where there are school raids happening. Tom Homan, the federal border czar, has repeatedly said that they are not doing that. That is not a part of their mass deportation operation. If they go into schools, okay, if they go into schools, they're not raids. They're not sweeps. They're not rounding people up and checking out to see if they're illegal or not. What's going on is they're going in very targeted, and they're conducting operations that go after Venezuelan teens who happen to be in schools. And most likely that's definitely not going to happen in McLean County. I doubt that we have Venezuelan gang members. They tend to do inner city. If they are, then that would be a situation where ICE agents would be able to go in. I want to get back to this. According to Reform for Illinois campaign finance database, Midway staffing has contributed to many politicians, like the city of Berwyn Mayor Robert Lavero, State Representative Fred Crespo, State Secretary or the Secretary of State Alexi Janulius, and then State Senator Don DeWitt. Okay, so you've got all of these politicians that this agency is also contributing to, and that's not a good look. You've got an agency known for, at this point, hiring children, okay, violating child labor laws, and those same people are contributing to politicians, and this agency is contributing to politicians. And I would take notes of those names of those politicians whom this Midway staffing temp agency. But it's not just the temp agency, okay? Yes, they did the facilitating of the hiring, but who staffed or who sent the applications to the temp agency or the hiring agency, okay? It was Tent Partnership. Tent Partnership was... they signed an agreement with the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, and they've been receiving federal taxpayer dollars. And that's what Donald Trump is putting a stop to. Quite literally, with this federal funding freeze, we are putting a stop to child trafficking, and we are putting a stop to this immigration crisis because the system itself is so broken, which is what I'm going to get to here in Illinois. You're making that up. You are working for ICE. Make the gangs think they are clear and blono. Have the schools raided. I don't know what you're talking about, man. The likelihood that we have Venezuelan gang members in Bloomington is unlikely, okay? These Venezuelan gang members tend to flock towards areas like Chicago, New York City, okay? Bloomington is not, I would say, like an urban area, and it's just common sense, okay? I'm not working for ICE. I don't understand what you're talking about. Little conspiratorial, man. Hey, good morning. I so do appreciate you tuning in each and every single morning. Yes, a lot of people are shocked to hear that this was an actual story. HelloFresh, they are under investigation right now for child labor, violating child labor laws. Now, this is a large meal kit provider. They had actually partnered with Tent Partnership, which is a big deal. Tent Partnership for Refugees. This is a non-government organization who received taxpayer funds, worked with Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, in 2022. They came to an agreement, and what they tried to do was, quote, expand economic opportunity for refugees. Really, that's, Democrats speak for, we're going to, load up these companies with children, and we're going to have children work for these companies, and we're going to exploit children for their labor. That's really what that means, obviously. So this is a Tent Partnership for Refugees, non-government organization. And the reason why I brought this up this morning is because this is the single most important thing that Donald Trump has done. He's doing a federal freeze, which does not include individual assistance. Okay, so you're going to get your SNAP benefits. You're going to get your Social Security. Relax. Now, what's going to happen here is that they're freezing all of the federal tax dollars that are going to these corrupt NGOs who practice things like child labor, and they violate human rights. I mean, this is insane. Okay, and there's multiple of these. Tent Partnership is just one, Tent Partnership for Refugees, but there's multiple NGOs, and this immigration crisis is not an accident. It is a well-oiled system facilitated by these NGOs, and it's being funded by your federal tax dollars. And what Donald Trump is doing with this freeze is he's stopping that. He's stopping $50 million worth of condoms going to Gaza, okay? And he's being a good steward of your taxpayer dollars because that's what you elected him to do on November 5th. Now, before I took the break, I was telling you a little bit about Stellantis. I predicted that this was going to happen within months. I mean, I probably could go and find the tape here where I talked about Belvidere, Illinois, and this plant. It's a Stellantis plant. And I talked about how the Brazil plant has been seeing expansions. They're investing all kinds of money into it. And this plant has been sitting idle for a very, very long time. Now, State Representative Adam Niemerg said that the plant shut down under Governor J.B. Pritzker, Senator Tammy Duckworth, Dick Durbin, former President Joe Biden, and now it's reopening under Donald Trump. So it's simple, folks. It's because Donald Trump got elected and he's doing things like tariffs. And now these companies like Stellantis, they're bringing their jobs back to the United States because it's cheaper, because they don't want to pay the tariffs. Okay. Senators Duckworth, Durbin, they're trying to take credit for some with some press releases, obviously, on the jobs coming back. This is what Adam Niemerg says, but this plant closing is a direct result of bad policies that the Democrats continue to enact. Stellantis, it's too expensive to live and to work in the state of Illinois via the corporate income tax and the property taxes. So it would make sense as to why Stellantis was not going to invest in their Belvidere plant and provide people with jobs at that plant. They were going to let it sit idle, and then they were going to go and do their thing in Brazil because it's cheaper. And this is all because of bad policies enacted by the Democrats, property taxes, corporate income taxes, all of that could be fixed at the State House in Springfield, but they choose not to do it. So this is bad policy, and that's what resulted in Stellantis not investing in that Belvidere plant and staying in that Belvidere plant and providing jobs. Niemerg says this: we've spent hundreds of billions of dollars on green energy, and it's not market shareable or productive. Okay, with a few days. So that's the thing that I always talk about. Governor J.B. Pritzker picks winners and losers. Okay, so he provides all kinds of tax credits to electric vehicle makers. Stellantis, not known for their electric vehicles. Okay, Chrysler, Dodge, they're not known for that kind of stuff. And he's picking winners and losers here in the state. And of course, you know, a company like Stellantis, if they're not receiving tax credits, like Safe for Goshen example, this is an electric vehicle battery maker. They're going to come to Illinois because guess what? They're getting all kinds of tax credits because Governor J.B. Pritzker likes to pick winners and losers in what industries succeed in his state. And that screws everybody over because guess what? That Belvidere plant, 1,500 jobs are now coming back to Illinois. And Governor J.B. Pritzker, through his picking winners and losers through these tax credits, what he did was deprived Illinoisans of those blue-collar jobs that we so desperately want. So within a few days of Donald Trump being back in office, we see 1,500 jobs coming to Illinois for a mid-sized pickup truck that they're going to be manufacturing there in the state of Illinois. Congratulations, President Donald Trump. Now, you can imagine who was trying to take credit for this. Governor J.B. Pritzker, Tammy Duckworth, Dick Durbin, they have been screaming about the Belvidere plant and about how it's, you know, this evil corporation who's not working with the union, okay, the UAW. And what Pritzker did, he commended the UAW for resolving its grievances with Stellantis, as if the UAW had anything to do with this, or if even Stellantis had anything to do this. This was all Donald Trump's doing because guess what? The Stellantis chairman met with him twice, and he was in D.C., I think, for a couple of weeks. And Pritzker said this in a statement: "My administration has worked tirelessly with our partners to secure this investment, and we're excited to see it come to fruition." This is hilarious. Like, you are straight up insane, man, if you think that this was your doing. This has been, I don't know how long it's been shut down. It's been shut down, I think, since 2023. Okay, you had 2 years. Donald Trump did it in a few days of being president. Like, come on, man. We all know. I mean, it's very simple. Under your administration, under the Pritzker administration, under the Joe Biden administration, under Tammy Duckworth and Dick Durbin, the Stellantis Belvidere plant was closed. It was idled for over 2 years. Okay. And within a couple of days, guess who comes in? Donald Trump, and he works out a deal with Stellantis. Obviously, the chairman met with him. Most likely it had something to do with tariffs, is my guess. I don't know. I wasn't in the room, right? But I predicted this. I said that, they're going to be back within a couple of months. That was my prediction. I didn't suspect a few days that this plant would be invested in, that Stellantis would be investing in the Belvidere plant. But they were going to, stop investing in the Brazil plant because it's just too expensive with the tariffs, and that they were going to start expanding the Belvidere plant. And I was wrong. It took Donald Trump literally a few days of being president to do this. Here's what Bill Foster, Democrat from Naperville, said in a statement. He says, "I'm thrilled that Stellantis is following through on their agreement with the UAW." Look, folks, Stellantis had no intention with following through on their agreement with the UAW, okay? You can cry and scream at the sky all you want, UAW. And they actually were upset because, the electric vehicles, they wanted to produce something like this mid-sized pickup truck. They wanted to do that because that's more jobs and it's more hours. The electric vehicles, I guess, I don't know, because I'm not an auto worker, obviously, but it doesn't require that much manufacturing, and it doesn't require that many people and that many hours. So they wanted to produce gas-powered vehicles or combustion engines and manufacture those. And of course, Stellantis said, no, we don't want to do that here in the state of Illinois, because we're not going to get tax credits for that. If we were to do, electric vehicles and try so hard with the electric vehicles, then we're going to get tax credits for that. And that's the only way we can operate here in the state of Illinois, is if we get tax credits, because it's so damn high to operate businesses here because of the corporate income tax. Okay. So here's what Bill Foster says: "I'm thrilled that Stellantis is following through with their agreement with the UAW. This victory is a direct result of the solidarity of the workers on the picket lines and the UAW members nationwide." No. Donald Trump, he made a promise to the UAW workers that he was going to get these companies to not, invest in the Brazil plant and invest in the Mexico plants. He made a promise to the UAW workers that he was going to negotiate with it. It wasn't the UAW workers and their picket lines that made the difference. It was Donald Trump coming in and threatening tariffs with these companies, because that's how the economy works, stupid. Okay, so Niemerg said Trump met with Stellantis stakeholders, and that's why the jobs are coming back. Stellantis announced in 2024 that it was investing $6 billion into its Brazil facility from 2025 to 2030. I'd imagine that they're going to be pulling back a lot of that investment and diverting it back to the Belvidere plant. Niemerg, when asked about the tariffs being used to force Stellantis to invest in the Belvidere plant, he says, "I think the America First agenda, and Donald Trump has always stood for, this America First agenda that he's always stood for, continues to be a big reason why Stellantis has decided to put more money back into this plant." So all of his America First agenda and his policies and everything he's always stood for and continues to stand for is a big reason why Stellantis decided to put money into the Belvidere plant. So there's just so much here. I got to take a quick break, but you're listening to Conservative Cat. I do want to get to this eventually. This is a recent analysis done using data of our own Department of Justice, the Federal Department of Justice, Illinois Policy Institute. They did this analysis where they found, get this statistics, this is insane, buckle up. On average, more than one Illinois public servant has been convicted every week between 1883 and 2023, or 1983 and 2023. Okay, so this means that from 1983 all the way to 2023, we had a public servant convicted in the state of Illinois for every single week between 1983 and 2023. That's a lot of public servants who are doing corrupt things and are being convicted. So this new policy, or this policy advocacy group, Illinois Policy Institute, they are calling for reforms. I'm going to be back here in just a little bit. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Yeah, slavery under the guise of compassion. That's exactly right, Bob. Oh, no. I my sentiment here with HelloFresh, they should have never done that partnership. I'm not HelloFresh. Now Stellantis, it doesn't start really with Stellantis. I mean, they're just trying to make money. Okay, they're a corporation. They sell something. Okay, and they have to make money. Okay, and the politicians, what they've done is they've made it impossible to do business here in the state of Illinois, which is why they left the Belvidere plant idle. Okay, now I'm not saying that Stellantis doesn't have any fault, okay, in not working with the UAW workers on an agreement. However, how can you conduct business when you're living and you're doing business in such a unfriendly business climate, okay, where you've got high property taxes and high corporate income tax? You can't pay your workers. We're living in reality here. So Stellantis, I'm not saying that they, are blameless in this, but definitely they wouldn't have invested in the Brazil plant if it was more expensive, okay, to do so. It was cheaper to do so. And why is that? That is directly because of the Democrat policies that have been enacted by Dick Durbin, Tammy Duckworth, Governor J.B. Pritzker, and President Joe Biden. Now, as far as the NGOs and the HelloFresh, if that's what you're talking about, HelloFresh, no. Why the hell in the private sector would you partner with a non-government organization that's receiving federal tax dollars, okay? It's one thing as a private company, and I don't even really like this. I said, no, like we should not be doing tax credits based on industry and what you produce. Okay. So that's where you wind up with a situation. And I believe Missouri doesn't do that, where they do, I call them selective tax credits, where they give tax credits to, here in Illinois, we give them to electric vehicle companies. We give them to semiconductor companies. What's another one that Pritzker loves? There's different industries, which I'm sure his friends are in, okay? And he's got investments in these types of industries. I know Nancy Pelosi is invested in the semiconductor industry, okay? And he has everything to benefit if those industries benefit, which is why he does tax credits for those specific industries. Now, if you make something like combustion or combustible engine, or like a fuel-powered car, okay, and Governor J.B. Pritzker doesn't have any skin in that game, he's not going to provide you a tax credit, okay? So that's picking winners and losers, and really, any kind of private sector company that is working with the government in any kind of way, I don't like it at all. You're supposed to be, there's public sector, there's private sector. And when you start to kind of mix the two, that's where it kind of gets dicey, which is exactly what happened with Michael Madigan. Okay, ComEd, you scratch my back, I scratch your back kind of thing. This is a private sector company. And they craft favorable legislation to prop up this company and to make it, tax credits and all of that, and to make that company's life easier. And that's not free market. I'm totally against that, and as should everybody. Everybody should be against that. We should really adopt a model like Missouri, right? These companies, to entice them to come here, we should just have low taxes and make it a business-friendly climate. Okay, there's no reason why we should be doling out money to certain industries. Okay, so Yeah, I've always been anti-corporation. I mean, there's corporate. I didn't say that HelloFresh was blameless in this. In fact, their partnership with these NGOs proves that they want to skirt the system and they want to be lazy. Really, it's just a sign of laziness. So, for example, HelloFresh, I mean, just a totally lazy company, and they hired this midway staffing agency to do all of their hiring, which is one thing. But then this midway staffing agency was lazy in that they didn't even try to find applicants themselves. They went straight to this NGO who's receiving taxpayer dollars. Okay, so one thing that Donald Trump, I think, is going to do is say, hey, companies, I'm sorry, you're not going to be lazy anymore. And maybe it's not so much lazy as it is taking shortcuts because you're broke. And really, it's all designed so that way you rely on the federal government and the government taxpayer dollars for contracts, government contracts, and things like that. These companies are relying on federal taxpayer money because they don't want to create a good product and sell it. Okay, at the end of the day, that's what you're doing, is creating a good product and sell it. I don't know anything about HelloFresh's products because guess what? I'm not lazy. I go out and I make my own food. But clearly they're trying to take shortcuts, and they screwed up because they took a shortcut with a non-government organization, and not really even non-government organization, because they're getting federal taxpayer dollars. Woohoo! Hey, good morning. You're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the news and talk blooming to normal. So do appreciate you tuning in. Now, Eric Sorensen, oh gosh, this guy gives me a headache. In a statement, he said he's proud to have fought alongside UAW workers to hold big auto companies accountable to make this happen. Look, the big auto companies, or companies in general, they're not going to invest in the Belvidere plant, and they're not going to invest in their American plants, okay? These manufacturers are not going to invest in the American plants if it's too expensive. Okay, so it doesn't mean that they're big bad companies, and believe me, there are big bad companies. We just talked about HelloFresh and how they did this terrible partnership with this NGO called Tent Partnership for Refugees. I talked about that. There's terrible things that corporations do. I'm not pro-corporation, but these people with Stellantis, they quite literally just can't operate in the state of Illinois as effectively and as for as cheap as they can in Brazil. Okay, that's what it comes down to. And why is that? It's the Democrat policies that have been enacted over the years: the high property taxes, the high corporate income tax, the tax credits of picking winners and losers, what industries succeed in this state and what ones don't. The electric vehicle battery maker Goshen, they're receiving all kinds of tax credits. Had Stellantis received that, maybe they would have stayed in Belvidere and not made their plant idle for 2+ years. Okay, Eric Sorensen did absolutely nothing to get this deal to happen, where 1,500 we now have 1,500 jobs coming to the Belvidere plant, coming back to Illinois. And the reason for that is, of course, Donald Trump met for 2 days with the Stellantis chairman. Okay, and they came to an agreement that, hey, I'm going to make the I think it's a Dodge Durango midsize truck. They're manufacturing that there in the state of Illinois. And that's huge news. But everybody's going to be jumping to take credit for this. And you guys, you had 2 years. The picket lines for 2 years were not the reason why this happened. Okay. So Eric Sorensen, you can try to steal the credit all you want. At the end of the day, we all know, because guess what? For 2+ years, while this plant was sitting idle, and it went idle under President Joe Biden, Dick Durbin, Tammy Duckworth, Governor J.B. Pritzker, and you. It stayed idle, and it went idle under Democrats. And guess who restored the Belvidere plant? It was Donald Trump a few days after him being in office. So we know exactly what this is all about. I hate how he says this in his statement. Here's what Sorensen says. He says, this isn't just about bringing manufacturing home. No, that's exactly what this is about. The tariff situation that Donald Trump was going to impose on this company, Stellantis, they said to themselves, well, it's probably just cheaper if we invest in America. this American plant because we don't want to pay these crazy tariffs that we're going to have to pay if we invest any more in our Brazil plant. That's just going to be too expensive for us. Okay, so enacting policies that make sense. Okay, so it is all about bringing manufacturing home. He says it's about giving Rockford area families the good paying jobs they deserve to support their families and thrive. Look, folks, I mean, there's nothing that you can do when you don't have, and when it's not financially feasible for you to operate a plant in Belvidere, Illinois, in comparison to Brazil, because the property tax situation, the tax credit situation where you're picking winners and losers, and the corporate income tax. At the end of the day, you can't pay, your employees what they might deserve because the state is so unfriendly to business. Okay. So Illinois Policy Institute, Dylan Sharkey, he said that Stellantis bringing jobs to the state is good news, but there's still a lot of work to be done. Obviously, we have to fix the second highest property taxes in the country. We also have the second highest corporate income taxes in the country. And these are two huge deterrents for new business and already established ones. Okay. So I want to shift gears. Let's talk a little bit about, and I gave you this statistic. This is an incredible one. Illinois Policy Institute, where they found out on average more than one Illinois public servant was convicted every week between 1983 and 2023. Now, this policy advocacy group, Illinois Policy Institute, they're calling for reforms. I'm going to get to this here in just a second. You're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. Hey, go ahead, smash that like button. We are going to be back talking a little bit about Michael Madigan, and his defense kind of wrapped up their arguments a couple of days ago. I think it was on Monday where they wrapped up their arguments. And now we have groups across Illinois, Reform for Illinois and Illinois Policy Institute. They're calling for reforms. And really what has to happen is you have to fix this broken system. Here we go. Democrats are all about vaccinations, but import unvaccinated illegals in millions. Yeah, I know. None of what they do makes sense, Henry. None of what they do makes sense. Please make it make sense. If the Democrats have any standards, it's double standards. They import millions of unvaccinated illegals in millions, and then they turn them loose in our cities and our food plants. Yes, exactly. So you've got, not only the children aspect of this, but, they're claiming that these kids are refugees. They're claiming that these illegal immigrants are refugees. Most of these people are not fleeing religious or persecution, religious persecution or political persecution. And these NGOs, even if they are fleeing those situations, they're taking advantage of those immigrants, and then they're funneling them into, private sector jobs. And they're exploiting, these corporations are exploiting the immigrant labor. Okay. And you'll hear, I think it was Jake Tapper, where he was talking about how, a majority of our farmers, outsource their labors to immigrants, and that's going to have such a detriment if you deport those people on the American economy, if you deport people who are working on farms. Number one, and we're not talking about people who work on farms that are being deported. We're talking about, gangsters who are in the inner cities, and a lot of those people who came in through the border, the Biden border crisis. Most of those people are your gang members in these inner cities. Okay. We're not talking about the farmers, who are out there picking oranges or picking crops. Number one. Number two, surely anybody with that argument where they're like, oh, well, we need the immigrants because Americans don't want to do those jobs. Number one, I don't think that's true. I think it's very racist to say that's true. I think a lot of Americans would like a job farming. Farmers, it's not, based on your skin color. It's not based on your nationality or origin, where you come from. Anybody can farm if they have, a passion for it. Anybody can do anything if they have a passion for it. And I think a lot of Americans have passion for farming. And I think it's gross that people insinuate that it's okay to exploit immigrant labor in this country simply because, you know, Americans are lazy or whatever, and we don't want to do it, and we're willing to exploit immigrant labor. I don't think that that's the American way, and I don't like that Democrats advocate for that kind of stuff, where they're like, oh, well, we have to have the immigrant farmers, the illegal immigrant farmers, otherwise, you know, the job won't get done. They won't be able to pay. I don't like that. That's very like, and it's the same Democrat Party from the 1800s, right, where they were pro slaves. Okay, so that's why they don't want the illegals to leave, because they like exploiting the labor of these illegal immigrants through these NGOs. Okay, the NGOs, they're facilitating all of this. Okay, they're the ones who collect the immigrants and then they funnel them into these jobs where they can be exploited and where their labor can be exploited. And basically what this is, it's state sanctioned slavery. And it shouldn't shock you that it's coming from the Democrat Party, because guess what? This is the same party that did this in the 1800s with Black Americans, Black people. Okay. So, yeah, I got to take or we're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit about Michael Madigan. But yeah, that really bothers me when people are like, oh, the migrants, they pick our oranges. Who's going to pick our oranges? Let's not exploit migrant labor, shall we? Hey, good morning. You're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. Before we took the break, I was telling you about this policy advocacy group. It's the Illinois Policy Institute. They're calling for reforms. Now, one thing you need to know is how it kind of all works, how the sausage is made in Springfield. So one thing you need to know is the House Speaker, and we know Michael Madigan was a long-time House Speaker. He served in that role for years and years and years and years, decades. I think he was like one of the longest serving politicians ever, but I'll have to look into that and I'll get you the numbers. But the House Speaker, one thing you need to know, decides which bills live or die through the Rules Committee. So really this is like the bills go to die in the Rules Committee. So the Speaker appoints leadership positions that often have stipends accompanying them. The Speaker has a lot of power of what bills are called. So the Republicans, they never get their bills called because the House Speaker is a Democrat, right? And if he doesn't want a bill passed, then he's not going to pass it, and he's not even going to call it, okay? Even if it's popular with the state legislature, even if it has overwhelming support, and if he doesn't want that bill passed, then you're not going to see any movement on it. He can make sure there's no movement on this bill. And we saw that with Michael Madigan during the trial here, where interests, they wanted certain legislation passed, and the Speaker had the say. They went to the one person who had the say in what bills should be passed, and that was the Speaker, Michael Madigan. So that needs to be fixed. There needs to be rules surrounding the House Speaker. I'm going to get to more here on the other side. You're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. We'll be right back. Migrant and illegal aliens are the Dems' new slave labor with a master plan to ultimately conquer America. Yeah, well, those migrants who work on the farms have seasonal work visas. Yeah. Like I said, and biblically, and I'm going to keep bringing this up, because a lot of times, who was that woke pastor who, grilled President Donald Trump while he was sitting in the pew there? Total blasphemy. But a lot of people will selectively take out verses that biblically, the motif, and this is how you know it's biblical and if it's true, is if you see it multiple times in the Bible, and this theme in multiple times in the Bible, it's where you treat your immigrants well and they treat you well. Okay, and that makes sense when you think about it, because the teachings of Jesus, treat neighbors as you would treat yourself. Okay, treat your neighbors as you treat yourself. It's a sentiment in the Bible, I guess. Treat your neighbor well, and that is something, I mean, you can see it back in Genesis, right, with Abraham, and he's in this foreign land, and, he pretty much shoves, money down the throat of this king whose land he's on, and he won't accept no for an answer. He wants to pay this man for him, having this burial ground for his wife. And this is in Genesis, but there's multiple times where you see this out throughout, biblical history, where you have your foreigners treating the people whose land they are on well, and vice versa. The people who, whose land it is, they treat the foreigners well. We have so many programs, seasonal work visas, we have student visas, we have green cards, asylum, naturalization, H-1Bs. There's so many different programs that you could get into, and you have temporary status here in the United States. Okay, we're talking about the worst of the worst, the types of people who probably can't get into those programs because they're a terrorist, or they have criminal backgrounds. Most likely, you can't get into those programs if you're a terrorist, or if you have a criminal background, or if you're a threat to public safety. Okay, you can't get into those programs. So the people who are coming through the illegal port of entry most likely are doing so because they cannot go through any other channel, because they are criminals. Okay, so you're spot on when you say that those migrants, this is a talking point from the Democrats, where they'll say, oh, who's going to pick our oranges? Who's going to farm our crops? Migrants are still going to do it. Okay, number one, because they're here seasonal work visas. We're not going after seasonal work visas or people who are here on work visas and are here legally in the country. We're going after people who come through the border through an illegal port of entry. Okay, so if you're here and you have a work visa, then you're safe. Okay, so you have nothing to worry about. You have something to worry about if you committed a crime and came through the border illegally, through an illegal port of entry. So, yeah, and like I said, I think there should be a lot of reforms to a lot of these work visa programs. So, example, I talk about this a lot, H-1Bs. I think that there should be reforms around that program, because originally it's supposed to be like a program where in the United States, say you have like a top surgeon that you need and you can't find one in the United States, then you go to, other places in the country and try to find one, maybe like in India. Now 60%, I think, of the H-1B program are Indians. Now, this has kind of been unchecked and fettered, and like they have let the H-1B program just kind of become not what it's intended to be. And now we have like Uber drivers here on the H-1B. Like, that makes absolutely no sense. Okay, so we definitely need to take a closer look at what these, visas are, and how they're coming into the country and why they're in the country. You have to have a reason as to why you want to be here, okay? And you have to be a contributing member, okay, of society. And that's a biblical theme where, you had, your flock, you had your cattle, Abraham, right? And he gives money, and he gives, flocks and cattle, and his herds, over to the guy whose land he's on. Okay, you have to be contributing something. And a lot of these work visas, you're coming into the country and you have no real reason to be here. Just because you want a better economic life. Like, and I always say this, why in the world would we take those people away from their country? They should be making their country better and staying in their country. We're going to wind up with everybody here, and all these countries are going to be crap because everybody's here. We're going to be right back. Go ahead, smash that like button. We're going to be talking about the Michael Madigan trial here next. Welcome to the Red Kingdom. Hey, you're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the news and talk Bloomington Normal. Man, we've talked about so much this morning. We've covered a lot of ground. Number one, I want to talk about this. They lied to you about the school raids happening earlier this week, and by they, I mean the left and the media. They tried to convince you and mislead you into thinking that ICE agents were going to be dropping down from the ceiling and nabbing your children. Not true. Now they're going to be on this full force. They're going to start saying that Trump is freezing your SNAP benefits and your Social Security benefits. Not true. What we're talking about here is not a sweeping federal funding freeze, okay? Not like a blanket federal funding freeze. What he's really doing is just making sure your tax dollars are not going towards things like $50 million worth of condoms going to Gaza. Okay, that makes absolutely no sense. And going to powerful NGOs who facilitate child labor here in the country. Okay, the immigration crisis is not done on accident. This is a well-oiled system, and he's sick and tired of federal tax money going to places like Tent Partnership for Refugees, who partners with private companies like HelloFresh, and we now know HelloFresh is under investigation by the Department of Labor for exploiting children and causing child labor, violating child labor laws. They're under investigation for that. So a lot of these NGOs, they are besides themselves, and they are losing their minds, which is why they've activated their leftist activists and the media to get them to lie about this, that Donald Trump is going after your SNAP benefits and your Social Security, because they are besides themselves, because they are losing the federal tax dollar gravy train, because Donald Trump said, nope, we're cutting it off. We're done. Now, he has, via an executive order, suspended refugee admissions. But on top of that, the State Department went further and they did a stop work order. And that's really what I think this federal funding freeze is all about. He wants to stop sending money to these NGO partners. And I told you about in 2022, Tony Blinken, he partnered with Tent Partnership and so many other non-government organizations that are definitely, exploiting immigrants for their labor. That's what, at the end of the day, really, this is state-sanctioned human trafficking, and Donald Trump is putting an end to it. Because these NGOs, what they do, they only exist to subvert the U.S. immigration laws and all of our other laws, our labor laws, all of it, every step of the process, okay? And they're actively transporting migrants into this country. They're fighting enforcement efforts at the border, and they're settling these migrants into towns, cities, and they are lobbying for open border policies in Washington, D.C. So your taxes, you work hard every single day, day in, day out, and you do it for your family. And then a little bit of that comes out for taxes. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. And your government then sends that money to an NGO who in turn hands it to immigrants, which they're not even handing it to the immigrants. They're collecting it for themselves. They might give like a couple of checks to the immigrants. And this is the immigration project, okay? They're going to give pennies to the immigrants, and then they're going to say, oh, we found you this nice job. They're going to pay you $7 an hour, and they're going to exploit these immigrants for their labor. And then the company's going to pay them for providing that labor, and the NGOs are the ones who benefit. You work hard, and you pay your taxes, and the government, what? They're just going to benefit these NGOs with this money, and not you, and definitely not immigrants, okay, because the NGOs are benefiting it. The immigrants aren't even benefiting from these NGOs. The NGOs are taking in all the money for themselves. So that, at the end of the day, that is what Donald Trump is doing with this federal funding freeze. He says, all right, we got to cut it off because the $50 million worth of condoms over to Gaza just doesn't make sense. And I want to be a good steward of your taxpayer dollars, okay? Before we took the break, I was telling you a little bit about Michael Madigan. Michael Madigan, his legal team, they wrapped up their defense arguments, I think on Monday it was. Now we have people calling for reforms. You have Joe Tabor, the director of legal research at the Illinois Policy Institute, talking about how the sausage is made and how we have to fix it. Now, before I took the break, I was telling you about how the speaker, he decides what bills live or die. okay, through the Rules Committee, and that needs to change because, as you saw in the trial, special interest groups, what they'll do to get their legislation passed, they'll just go to one person, and that's the House Speaker. Okay, that's really, really dangerous to have that much power. The power should really be in your legislators' hands and not just one guy. Okay, so that needs to be fixed. There needs to be a rule saying that, there needs to be a process in which multiple legislators get a say in what bills are going to be called and what bills live or die. Okay, because Republicans, being in the minority party, they're always shafted by this because they create these bills and then right away they go to Rules Committee and then they die because the House Speaker is a Democrat and he gets to decide what bills live or die. And if he's a Democrat, he's just going to send all the Republican bills to go die in Rules Committee. Okay, so that needs to be fixed. Lisa Kaplan, Reform for Illinois Executive Director, explained that the Legislative Inspector General's office does not have the authority to publish summary reports or subpoenas or issue subpoenas without the approval of lawmakers who make up the Legislative Ethics Commission. Okay, it's kind of counterintuitive. The Legislative Ethics Commission is actually, it's like, and this is how Lisa explains it. It's like the fox watching the hen house. These legislators are expected to oversee their fellow legislators ultimately, and really that power should be up to the LIG, the Legislative Inspector General. Say there's a complaint about a legislator doing corrupt things. Okay, they don't have the authority to issue a subpoena. They have to go to that legislator whose the complaint is about. They have to go to that legislator's buddies who are on the Legislative Ethics Commission. So you see what I'm saying here? It's all baked into the cake, and it's all correct. Like the way they make the sausage needs to be changed in order for it to work, in order for there not to be corruption. Okay, so she says, Lisa Kaplan, she says their colleagues, their friends, people that they need favors from in the future, they are the ones who have the true oversight here. It's just structurally the incentives are not there for particularly robust oversight. Okay, so why would you, if you're tasked with, overseeing your fellow legislators, why would you do that? Because these are your friends, your colleagues, and somebody you might need a favor from in the future. You have no true incentive to actually hold them accountable. The LIG being independent, and there's various ways you can do this and have more independence in this process for investigating and enforcing ethics complaints. Reform for Illinois, they testified about this back in 2019. They testified about it back in 2020, 2021. Nobody's doing anything about ethics reforms in Illinois. It's kind of sad when we have this stereotype. Every single time I say I'm from Illinois, people are like, "Ooh, that's a really corrupt state." And I'm like, yeah. And don't forget Barack Obama, right? This buy here, pay, or this you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back kind of politics. It all started right here, and it went up to the federal government because Barack Obama, he was from Illinois, and he went up to the federal government and applied it there in the federal government, and that's where you saw this really, the government's always been corrupt at the federal level, but there was a big change when Barack Obama got there. It's because he kind of brought this mentality of you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back kind of politics. Now, the legislature did allow at one point the LIG, the Legislative Inspector General, to open investigations on their own. But then guess what? They'll say that for a press release, right? They'll be like, oh, look, we gave them more power, the LIG. But then they restrict their jurisdiction in other ways. And ultimately, who pulls the strings and who's, enforcing the rules? It's the legislators who are still in charge of the legislators who are their friends, and they're not going to hold their friends accountable. So, whether Michael Madigan is convicted or not, I think Illinois needs to move forward. They need to address some of this corruption. They need to address a lot of power that the House Speaker has. There's even more that the power that the House Speaker has that I haven't gotten to yet. The House Speaker is allowed to call a bill for a vote without giving lawmakers any advance notice. So the House Speaker He can call these bills, and then ultimately, I mean, there's thousands of bills introduced every year. And ultimately, what you have are legislators who aren't able to read them all. According to Joe Tabor, he says lawmakers should be able to have lead up time to know what they're voting on and to be able to read the bills and discuss them and debate them. Okay, so if you haven't had a chance to read the bill and debate it, you can't debate it on the floor. Therefore, the public is unaware what the bill actually is and what it does. So there needs to be changes. The House Speaker shouldn't be able to call a bill without giving lawmakers advance notice of calling that bill for a vote. Okay, so there's another part of this that I wanted to talk about this morning, and you're listening to Cities 92.9, the News and Talk Bloomington Normal. Look, folks, Michael Madigan could be convicted here, and despite whether he's whatever the verdict is, we need reforms. Joe Tabor, he explained that the way the rules exist right now, lawmakers, if they have a conflict of interest, we still rely on the honor system here, okay? And they won't recuse themselves unless they think that they should recuse themselves, and they don't even have to disclose why they're recusing themselves. So, for example, I could see where this happens, and I've talked about him before, Thaddeus Jones. He's a state lawmaker, and he's also the mayor of Calumet City. And, you know, say a tornado rips through that city, okay? And the state, through emergency funding, they provide disaster relief to the area to kind of repair the area, okay? Now, that happens all of the time. It's a conflict of interest that being that he serves as the mayor of that city, right? Maybe if his home, you know, was destroyed, he wants, of course, all the money in the world to go over to the city, and that's a conflict of interest. And this is a hypothetical, folks. This hasn't happened. But Thaddeus Jones, the state representative, would have to recuse himself in that situation, and nobody's going to force him to recuse himself in that situation. You rely on the honor system, and even if you do recuse yourself, you're not required to disclose why you're recusing yourself. Real quick before I go on, there are major conflicts of interest going on right now in McLean County, and you guys need to take note of these races. Abby Scott, she's running for Bloomington City Council. She is a spouse or has some sort of relationship with the county board member, Corey Byrne. Okay, so that is a conflict of interest, a major conflict of interest, where you have a spouse serving in a lower form of government, and overseeing that lower form of government is the higher form of government, county board member, okay? You also have Crystal Abel. She is currently going for Normal Township Supervisor, and she currently is a county board member. You can see where that's kind of a conflict of interest. The county board oversees the town of Normal, and you know, it's a much larger part of government, and then that's a smaller part of government, and you can see where there could be a conflict of interest there. Cody Hendricks and Eric Hansen, McLean County board member, and Cody Hendricks is running for Bloomington mayor, already sits on Bloomington City Council. So, I mean, you're seeing this kind of stuff, and this is just typical Illinois politics. This kind of stuff happens all the time. Mayor Tiffany Henyard, she is the supervisor. She calls herself super mayor. She's the supervisor of the Thornton Township, and she's also the mayor of Dalton, which is a really, really bad situation over there. She's got like that. Mayor Lori Lightfoot, former Mayor Lori Lightfoot of Chicago, she took on this independent kind of investigation, and she's supposed to be coming out with her analysis of what kind of corruption and fraud happened under Tiffany Henyard's reign in that city of Dalton, or in the village of Dalton. So this is typical Illinois politics. We need to have a better system, not only just at the state level where we don't rely on the honor system, but I don't think that we should be allowing our lawmakers and our elected officials to serve in two forms of government, especially one that is higher than another. And I'm sorry, but it's clearly a conflict of interest, and we have multiple of them in McLean County, which, you know, it breeds corruption, and we should be holding these people more accountable and having higher ethics where we don't have spouses. I mean, there's no diversity of thought there. Whatever happened to like Democrats? I thought they loved diversity. There's no diversity of representation if everybody from the same household is serving in all facets of government. I do want to shift gears. Let's talk a little bit about Elisa Kaplan. She says that there's not much of an appetite. She's with Reform for Illinois. She says there's not much of an appetite for meaningful reform. Even after, Madigan was indicted in 2019, nobody's really done anything about corruption. Nobody's really done anything about ethics reforms. And that's an issue that she is predicting or suspects might become an issue in the 2026 gubernatorial race. I don't know who's running. I have an idea that maybe Aaron Del Mar is going to be running against Governor J.B. Pritzker. That's complete rumor, speculation. Have no idea if that's actually, true. I haven't seen him announce. I'll have to go check it out and see if he has yet. But I suspect that they're going to make it a talking point on the 2026 gubernatorial trail. And I pray that we get somebody in here who is actually, because Governor J.B. Pritzker has been in there since Michael Madigan has been indicted since 2019. He said that he's going to do all of these things, but none of these things have actually been done. We need to get somebody in there, if nothing else, who is going to take corruption and ethics reforms very seriously. All right, I got to shift gears. Got to take a break, actually. We'll be back. I do want to get to some national news. I don't miss Caroline Jean-Pierre, who is Black and lesbian. And I say that Black lesbian Caroline Jean-Pierre because she really, really cares about her insignificant birth traits and her preferences in the bedroom. And that's why I included in her title, the former press secretary. I don't miss her at all. And I'm very excited about Karoline Leavitt. So she took down the media in her first press briefing, and she did not disappoint. I'll be back with that here next on Conservative Cat. Hey, go ahead, smash that like button, share this out with your friends. God said, if the stranger is bad, you treat them probably true. Odd. No. So, biblically, there is a motif or a common theme where you will have foreigners in lands that are not their own, right? Foreigners in lands that are not their own, and they have to respect the land in which they are residing in that moment, okay? And they are foreigners on that land, and they have to respect the person whose land that is, okay? And that's a common theme in the Bible, where you have the foreigners who respect, and it's vice versa as well. The person who owns that land, they're respectful of the foreigner. Now, if the stranger is bad, that means that they must be booted out of the country or out of that land, and they are no longer there to stay. Okay, so it's not if a stranger is bad, then you have to treat them bad. You have to say, hey, okay, you're coming here, you're disrespecting my land, you're disrespecting my hospitality, okay, and you're no longer able to stay. I mean, Dan, if I came into your house and, I had muddy shoes, muddy boots on my feet, and I just propped them up there on your couch, and I ate all of your food, and I don't know, I started messing up your house, right? You probably wouldn't like that at all. And you would probably kick me out if I started disrespect. Anytime you invite somebody into your home, do you want them to treat you bad? Right? Do you want them to eat all of your food, burp in your face? I don't know, whatever it is. Do you want them to treat you bad? No. If you lend somebody your lawnmower, right, to cut your grass, are you going to expect it to be returned intact, or what if they completely? You probably won't lend them your lawnmower anymore. We, as America, should not allow people to infiltrate our culture with their bad culture and what we deem an unacceptable culture. Child brides, human trafficking, defecating in the streets publicly, murdering people, okay? All of these things that we've deemed bad are laws, right? And morally corrupt. And everything that we've deemed morally corrupt, they need to abide by that and they need to act accordingly. Okay. And if they come here and they disrespect our home and our rules, then I'm sorry, we have to, show you out. Yeah. So, I mean, not treat them bad. I mean, but treat them with being fair. I mean, you're not going to let somebody trample all over you. Okay. I mean, that's common sense, man. I mean, if I came into your house and I disrespected your house and disrespected your property, you probably wouldn't like it very much. Okay. Now, I don't know why you don't have this feeling when it comes to America. This is your home. You're an American. I'm assuming. I don't know why you don't see America as your home and as your homeland. And maybe that's a personal issue you have where you don't like America. And if that's the case, then maybe you shouldn't live here. Okay. If you don't like the area, if you don't like your home, if you move to a certain area and you just can't get comfortable and you don't find it homey, you move. Okay, so if you don't find America to be your home and you don't have a passion for it, much like, your home that you probably reside in, where if somebody were to come in and start breaking your things, you would be pretty upset by that. If you're not upset by that because, here in America where you've got illegal immigrants coming in and they're smashing up things quite literally and they're killing people and they're disrespecting our rules, our house rules, then I don't know what to tell you. You just don't see America as your home and maybe you should move. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's probably, what's best for you if you don't view America as your home and have the same disdain, not disdain, but same, hey, you can't stay here if you're ruining my property, if you're disrespecting the rules of my house. Hey, good morning. I so do appreciate you tuning in each and every single morning. Yes, we are going to get to this press briefing because she took them down. She took down the media, the leftists, but I repeat myself. This was her first press briefing, and I'm going to just be honest with you. I really don't miss Karoline Jean-Pierre.
Thanks, Karoline. A question that we've asked your predecessors, both parties in this job. When you're up here in this briefing room speaking to the American public, do you view yourself and your role as advocating on behalf of the president or providing the unvarnished truth that is, not to lie, not to obfuscate to the American people?
I commit to telling the truth from this podium every single day. I commit to speaking on behalf of the President of the United States. That is my job. And I will say it's very easy to speak truth from this podium when you have a president who is implementing policies that are wildly popular with the American people. And that's exactly what this administration is doing. It's correcting the lies and the wrongs of the past 4 years, many of the lies that have been told to your faces in this very briefing room. I will not do that. But since you brought up Truth Seek, I would like to point out, while I vowed to provide the truth from this podium, we ask that all of you in this room hold yourselves to that same standard. We know for a fact there have been lies that have been pushed by many legacy media outlets in this country about this president, about his family, and we will not accept that. We will call you out when we feel that your reporting is wrong or there is misinformation about this White House. So yes, I will hold myself to the truth, and I expect everyone in this room to do the same.
Okay. Yeah. Not missing Karoline Jean-Pierre yet. So I am just so tired of the left and their misinformation. Like yesterday, it was Tom Homan's going in and nabbing all of the children out of the schools. Today, it's Donald Trump is taking away your SNAP benefits and your Medicare and your Social Security benefits. Not true. Like I said, it's not a blanket funding freeze. He's really doing this, I think. But, there's multiple, federal funding that he's, looking at here. $50 million, like I said, in condoms to Gaza. I can't stress that enough, that's what was allocated to Gaza. They've bought $50 million worth of condoms to go send over there. That's not humanitarian aid, by the way, folks. And it's these NGOs that we're funding, and these NGOs ultimately are practicing things like and exploiting immigrant labor and child immigrant labor. And he's putting a stop to that, and he's freezing all of that funding to these NGOs. That is I think it's the single most important thing Donald Trump has done in his presidency so far in this term, is stopping the funding to these NGOs right away because they're committing atrocities like and violating child labor laws. Okay, so let's actually talk about this. Karoline is the youngest press secretary. Karoline Leavitt is the youngest press secretary in U.S. history. She did not hesitate to interject some common sense, and this is a big one here, folks. This is common sense, and this is irrelevant legacy media. So you know this, but the media will, not use their noggins and use this common sense. So Karoline here, she was like, you know what? I'm going to provide some common sense to these liberal media members. Take a look.
Can you just tell us the numbers? How many have a criminal record versus those who are just in the country illegally?
All of them, because they illegally broke our nation's laws and therefore they are criminals as far as this administration goes. I know the last administration didn't see it that way, so it's a big culture shift in our nation to view someone who breaks our immigration laws as a criminal, but that's exactly what they are.
Can you just tell us the numbers? How many have a
Oh, I know it's a big culture shift, but that's exactly what they are. The fact that she needs to inform them that they are illegal aliens means illegal alien means that they broke the federal immigration law. Okay, this is astonishing. And this is why the media has largely become irrelevant. Nobody listens to legacy media. Nobody listens to publicly paid media. $32 million, by the way, to NPR. Just last year, no, in 2023, it was $32 million that was allocated to NPR, by the way. And yet they still ask you for donations, which is hilarious. Now, not only do they use the terms immigrant and illegal alien interchangeably, but they do so in hopes of confusing the masses, much like, they say that school raids are going on at schools. They want to confuse you. They want to cause fear in the community. And that's a big problem because guess what? Voters aren't that dumb. People who, tune into the news aren't that dumb, and they know who's in charge of this pathetic propaganda. And really, it's the Democrat Party who's in charge of the pathetic propaganda that the legacy media spouts all of the time. Okay, so the biggest scandal revealed here during the press briefing was this attempt to send $50 million to fund condoms in Gaza. Like, that is the biggest scandal I think I've ever seen. And they tried to say that this was humanitarian aid. That is a slap in the face to you, to me, to Americans everywhere who are struggling to make ends meet. You go to work and you pay your taxes. You work hard for what? Your taxes to go to people in Gaza for their condoms? I mean, come on. These people don't care so long as they get to funnel your tax dollars into countries for foreign aid. They don't care about you. And clearly that's evident with this $50 million to Gaza. Take a listen. This is what the press secretary was talking about yesterday.
With the president's agenda, then the Office of Management and Budget will review those policies. I think this is a very responsible measure. Again, the past 4 years, we've seen the Biden administration spend money like drunken sailors. It's a big reason we've had an inflation crisis in this country. And it's incumbent upon this administration to make sure, again, that every penny is being accounted for honestly.
Why impose this pause with so little notice? Why not give organizations more time to plan for the fact that they are about to lose, in some cases, really crucial federal funding, at least for a period of time?
There was notice. It was the executive order that the president signed. There's also a freeze on hiring, as you know, a regulatory freeze, and there's also a freeze on foreign aid. And this is, again, incredibly important to ensure that this administration is taking into consideration how hard the American people are working. And their tax dollars actually matter to this administration. Just during this pause, DOJ and OMB have actually found that there was $37 million that was about to go out the door to the World Health Organization, which is an organization, as you all know, that President Trump, with the swipe of his pen in that executive order, is no longer wants the United States to be a part of. So that wouldn't be in line with the president's agenda. Doge and OMB also found that there was about to be 50 million taxpayer dollars that went out the door to fund condoms in Gaza. That is a preposterous waste of taxpayer money. So that's what this pause is focused on, being good stewards of tax dollars. Jennifer.
Yeah, so they're not going after your SNAP benefits either, by the way. Okay. Yeah, being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. I mean, isn't that what Donald Trump was elected to do on November 5th? I think so. Here's another one. You know those drones that were flying around in New Jersey? Yeah, well, it took Donald Trump a total of like 8 days to figure out that, hey, it was an enemy. It wasn't enemy drones. It was actually the Federal Aviation Administration. I had speculated that maybe it was our own government spying on us, but take a listen to what she had to say about that. They actually figured it out. They figured out what the drones were all about.
And before I turn to questions, I do have news directly from the President of the United States that was just shared with me in the Oval Office from President Trump directly, an update on the New Jersey drones. After research and study, the drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other reasons. Many of these drones were also hobbyists, recreational, and private individuals that enjoy flying drones. In time, it got worse due to curiosity. This was not the enemy. And before I turn to questions.
Okay, so he figured it out. I don't know why Biden didn't just tell us that. Why did Biden lie? They has said that we don't know where they're coming from. We have no idea where they're coming from. It was your own Federal Aviation Administration, dude. It was us. It was our drones. Why didn't you just come out and tell us that? Unless you have something to hide. So the reason why Joe Biden's administration lied to Americans is because the left lives off of fear and chaos. Okay. You can't control the masses when you ease their worries. Okay, and they didn't want to end the fear and the chaos, and that's why they lied to you. They knew exactly. It was them. They were the guys who were flying the drones. So while the drones weren't really much of anything because it was us, which I don't know if they were surveilling American citizens. That's kind of a big no-no. But you know, it seems like it was not much of anything. The bureaucracy, they sat back and they mocked voters as what might have been a form of punishment, maybe, for not acquiescing to 4 more years of the same, of 4 more years of Joe Biden. So maybe, and I'm speculating here, the Biden administration lied to you about those drones because they thought it was some sort of form of punishment because you didn't elect Joe Biden again. Okay, and they wanted you in fear and chaos because they were mad that you didn't elect President Joe, or when I say President Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. You didn't elect Kamala Harris. You didn't vote for more of the same with Kamala Harris. That being said, it's rather refreshing, isn't it, that we have a new press secretary at the podium, not America's DEI hire, the worst DEI hire ever, Karen Jean-Pierre. So this is Karoline Leavitt. And I think she's really, really refreshing, and it's great to have competence back behind that podium. All right, I'm going to be right back. You're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. My dad still watches CNN. Shake my head. Yeah, it's unfortunate. You know, you're going to have, it's really kind of sad. I see it a lot with perhaps maybe somebody who's a little bit older. You know, they're camped out in front of the TV. There's not much on TV, right? And if you're not up to speed with YouTube shows like this, if you're not up to speed with Rumble, other shows, I highly recommend the Dan Bongino show. If you're not up to speed on those things, then you're going to have very limited options, and you're going to wind up watching things like CNN and being brainwashed. And it's really sad because if you talk to anybody who watches CNN perpetually, you can just hear like the talking, like they have no words that are of their own, right? They just repeat the talking points like, oh, there's school rates, they're nabbing children, oh, they're going after legal citizens, which is not true. I'm going to be right back. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Good morning. Hey, you're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. Yes, I wanted to get to a few other things this morning. A reporter sharing the shocking immediate effect Donald Trump has had on the border crisis. And he says, I've never seen anything this low as far as people coming into the border. We've been very, or in over the border, we've been very focused on who's going out. We haven't been really focused on who's coming in, and it turns out not a whole lot of people are coming in anymore because of the mass deportation operation. I do also want to get to JD Vance's. I haven't talked about this. I know it's a little bit, older interview, but this is really good. And it's been taking social media by storm. JD Vance, he did an interview as VP, his first interview as vice president with Face the Nation's Margaret Brennan. And I'll tell you this, he crushed it. He absolutely crushed it. So let me talk a little bit about Bill Madigan. He is a reporter, and he's been covering the border for years now. In case you haven't heard, Donald Trump's mass deportation efforts started on day one because he promised to do this on day one. Many progressives have been shedding tears, and leftists have been having meltdowns, and they've been mocked, they've been ridiculed. Selena Gomez, I'm looking at Selena Gomez, rightfully so, okay, because we're talking about violent criminals who are being sent back to their home countries. Donald Trump is doing exactly what he said he was going to do. Promises made, promises kept. You know what I mean? Yeah, this is exactly what he said, what he was going to do. It's much like the federal funding freeze, okay? Everybody's like panicking. You should only be panicking if your nonprofit does nothing, okay? And it only makes, it only takes money from taxpayer dollars, and it essentially does nothing to benefit the community, okay? So if there's nonprofits that do nothing and are receiving federal funding and they don't actually help people, then yeah, you should be very, very worried. There's just a freeze, and it's not forever, okay? This is a temporary freeze. Many other presidents have done this in the past. This is not unprecedented in any kind of way. Actually, I would say a good handful of presidents have done this in the past. So anyway, so I want to get back to Bill Madigan. Promises made, promises kept. He ran on being a good steward of your taxpayer dollar, and he's doing that, okay? Now, Bill Madigan, he's down at the border, and he's been down at the border for years and years, folks. And we've been focused on people we've been sending back, and we're not focusing on who's trying to cross over. According to this reporter, there's not many people trying to cross over anymore. And we know this because he's been there. Okay, he's the reporter reporting on it, and he's been there for a long time. I remember back when I graduated college, he was there at the border, and everybody was saying, "Oh, there's this Biden border crisis. It's not real. It's not true." And then he was the guy who went out there with a camera and showed everybody the people, the migrant, what do you call them, caravans that were coming over the border. So, the Democrat oligarchy in the White House did everything they could to shame him, to hurt him, to call him fake news. But he was providing the truth. And that's important here, folks, because he was providing video of the Biden border crisis. Okay. And they didn't like that. So here we have the attempted crossings now are at record lows. The last 3 days, or the last few days, I've got numbers for January 24th. They were at 665. January 25th, they were at 731. And January 26th, they were at 582. Okay, so to put this into perspective for you, at the height of the border crisis in December of 2023, the Border Patrol, they hit a record of 11,000 plus illegal crossings over the border in a single day. So 11,000 people. Okay, so these are total border crossings, and that was just at one port, or just at one port we saw, and it's in the Del Rio sector. They were seeing 4,000 plus immigrants just going through that one port, the Del Rio sector, and that was at the height of the Biden border crisis in December of 2023. So we're talking thousands upon thousands, and it's been dwindled down now to like 600, 700, 500 attempted crossings, okay? So enforcing border policies help people, actually helps people and deters people from coming over the border illegally. Who would have guessed that, right? I got to take a quick break, but you're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. so shocking. Isn't it crazy that you've got illegal crossings? They're dwindling down now because you're enforcing policies like deporting people who enter the country illegally. Now you're starting to see these policies or these illegal border crossings dwindle. Who could have guessed that was going to happen? Wow, you're enforcing immigration law, and now people are emboldened to cross the border. Who could have guessed that? Oh, me, all of us, outside of the mainstream media and leftists. You're misleading people. How am I misleading people? I've only told the truth, okay? Provided you facts all morning, okay? The facts are thousands of these NGOs are getting government dollars, and they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be getting these government dollars because they are practicing in illegal things like child labor laws. They're violating child labor laws, slavery. I mean, essentially, this is slavery we're talking about. And there's multiple other like NGOs, like Green Weenie projects that, don't do anything for anybody, and they're just all collecting. And really what this is, it's a big scam for people in these NGOs to collect federal money and to have these cushy non-government organization jobs. And if that's the case, if you are, one of these NGOs that doesn't make any sense and isn't actually providing anything, then you're at risk, okay? He's freezing the federal funding temporarily. Most presidents have done this in the past. This is not unprecedented, where they take a look at everything that's going out and they make sure that it aligns with the Trump agenda. That's what we're talking about here, okay? And that's what the American people voted him in to do. Before kicking you out, I'd share the love of Jesus. Look, dude, I compared the two. So, do you see America as your home? Do you see America as your home? If you see America as your home, you wouldn't let somebody into your home who disrespects your rules and disrespects your home and destroys your property and disrespects you. Okay, you wouldn't do that. People don't do that. So. Just because, and this is where I think leftists really are screwed up in the brain, they think that me telling you no and having enough respect for you and myself for me telling you no, it's somehow being or it's somehow being mean or somehow being hateful or bigoted because I've told you no. I say this all of the time. No is not a bad word. It's called boundaries. Okay. And typically, if you love somebody, you will tell them no. If you've had children, I don't know if you do, you will tell your child no. If they're reaching up for a hot pot on the oven, you're going to say no because you love that person, right? And just because we say no, I'm not going to allow you to disrespect me and my home. That doesn't mean I don't love you. That just means that I'm a human being. I know my value, and I'm not going to allow you to do that to me, Woohoo! Hey, the ultimate Valentine's Day deal is here. Do you have someone special in your life? Someone you want to show love to and appreciation to this Valentine's Day? Don't be the guy that waits until last minute to buy the gift. We are offering amazing packages. We have 3 amazing packages for you to purchase right now on cities929.com. It's our Steals and Deals website. You just click on the Steals and Deals logo. We've got a dozen roses with a vase and a gift card for dinner to Texas Roadhouse or Brass Pig Smokehouse and Ale House, all starting at $59.95. Here's the catch, though. You got to act now. You got to act fast because we've only got 164 of these dinner and roses packages available. And when they're gone, they're gone. So fellas, don't wait until last minute to buy your gal a cute little Valentine's Day gift. You can choose red, pink, purple, or even orange roses, and they're beautiful roses, just gorgeous. So check it out. It's our Steals and Deals website. Get the deal now. Only 164 packages are available. You guys can have dinner and she can have some roses. Don't wait until last minute. Give the gift. Give the perfect gift this Valentine's Day. Don't just give a gift. Give the perfect gift. Cities929.com. Before we took the break, I was telling you a little bit about Bill Melugin. He's been down there at the border covering this. And it turns out, folks, who could have guessed it? If you're enforcing border policies, that actually helps people from illegally crossing the border. So it's kind of like this thing that I've always said, if you want to deter criminals from doing criminal activity, just enforce the law, right? If you enforce the law, if you lock people up when they're doing bad things, if they're committing crimes, then you're going to have people say, I don't think I'm going to commit crimes because I don't want to be locked up or I don't want to be deported. So there you have it. Now I want to play this. This is the mainstream media, and they still can't wrap their brains. Or this was from this is from CNN. And listen to Scott Jennings here. They still can't wrap their brains around the fact that most Americans are pro Donald Trump immigration policy.
Just criminals, they would say, "Oh, Trump is not going to do that."
They didn't believe it.
They didn't believe it. I have them on tape. I have them on tape.
I have all the anecdotes. The assertion that all American voters did not know exactly what Donald Trump is going to do. Oh, they didn't think it is totally false. There was mass amount of polling during the campaign. Hispanic Americans supported deportations in majority. You and I debated this many times. You claimed it wasn't true. And then what they do? They went and voted for Donald Trump.
And
The election results are clear. There is no buyer's remorse. The people who followed our laws and came here legally are more than happy to see the laws.
But here's what's being missed. I think this is very critical. In a vacuum, yes, majority of Americans do support mass deportation, Scott. But you have seen this also in polls. When you start telling them what that means,
illegals leaving, they support
it. No.
They support that.
Yes, they support the criminals. Let me finish. When you start telling them what that means, dreamers, veterans, teachers,
their
first
family,
responders, their family, then they say, you know what? These are people that have been here for 30 years. They have contributed trillions of dollars to our economy. I prefer to give them a pathway to citizenship. So you know what the solve is, Scott? In order to get rid of all of those illegals, let's give them a pathway to citizenship. That is a win-win for the economy, for us.
You're fighting the last battle.
All right. There are pathways to citizenship. I've talked about it. We were on the stream. You can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble, and you can subscribe to the channel. Bob, he was on the stream telling me, he goes, there's seasonal work visas, okay? And most of the farmers that these illegal immigrants, the Democrats, they'll say, oh, nobody's going to be able to pick our oranges. Surely, and I really I have to stop myself. I'm sure that the Democrats don't mean it when they say that kind of stuff. It comes off very racist. It comes off like they think that or that they're for exploiting illegal immigrant labor to do jobs that they don't want to do. And I don't think that that's an American ideal or part of our American culture in any kind of way. And I don't think anybody really wants that. Number one. Number two, there's seasonal work visas. We're not going after those people. There's H-1Bs, there's student visas, there's, so many of these different programs, naturalization, you can seek asylum, all of that. We're not going after that. So there is a pathway to citizenship currently right now. And don't let people dupe you into thinking that there is no pathway to citizenship and that these illegals have no way to become American citizens. That's not true. There's multiple ways, and unfortunately, they probably can't in their criminal background, or they have a terrorist background, which makes them not able to go through one of these programs, which is just some of the criteria that you need to have. And you need to not be a terrorist to go through this program. They enter through illegal ports of entry. That's who we're talking about here. And don't let Trump, DACA, Dreamers, he's actually talked, and this is something I'm totally against. This is something that I don't agree with Donald Trump. He says that he wants to give them amnesty, and he says that he's willing to work with the Democrats on that. He's said that before, and I'm just scratching my head. No, that's unconstitutional. DACA, Dreamer, all of that is unconstitutional. But Donald Trump has gone out and said, hey, I'm going to work with the Democrats and give these DACA members or DACA Dreamers amnesty. So it's complete fake news, and these people are ridiculous. All right, you guys have a blessed rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye. I love you. We'll talk again soon.